Building bridges rather than barricades is what life is all about.
Let's go into a little bit of that. The fighting that's happening right now between whose God is the right God. How can we make people of all faiths, atheists, religious people, understand each other better and try to find more common ground than conflict right now?
I think that what has happened is that as a culture, we've given way to narcissism. And of course, people might not be familiar with that word, but I mean, it comes from an ancient myth that you find in the literature of, say, Greece or Rome about a young man by the name of Narcissus, who never saw his own reflection. He was raised in the forest with animals, and he never saw his own reflection, for example, in a mirror, until one day he fell in front of an absolutely still pond of water to get a drink. And suddenly his face is coming back to him from the stillness of the water, and as the myth would have it, he got so fascinated with himself that he got closer and closer and closer to the water, and he fell in and drowned. That's the meaning of the word narcissism. You're asking me, how do we bring people together? Whether it's a faith issue, political issues, how do we bring people together? We all have to struggle against the narcissistic tendencies that manifest themselves in our lives, whether we want to admit it or not. We're terribly self-absorbed. And we have to be willing to surrender some of that self-absorption and think more broadly about the body politic, the community of which we are a part. You know, I used the example last Sunday in my homily at the chapel there at Sconset about a family sitting down to dinner on a Friday night, and the mother says to the teenage daughter, "It's your turn to do the dishes tonight when we're finished." And she announces, "I'm not doing the dishes. I'm cheerleading at the football game and I haven't got time. Let Joey do it." Joey's on the other side of the table and he said, "I'm not doing the dishes tonight. I'm playing football and I have to be with the team at the field. Let Harry do it." And little Harry's at the bottom of the table and he said, "I get stuck with this every night and I'm not doing it." And the father turns to the mother and says, "Why don't you do something about these kids?" And she turns to the father and says, "They're just as much your children as they are mine." And suddenly the family is caught in argumentation, in contention. Why? Because nobody around that table will surrender their own turf. The answer, it seems to me, to bringing people together and overcoming the separations, the divisions, the alienation, the individualism, is that we have to be willing to surrender our turf. We have to stop thinking that we're the center of the universe.
But when your religion says that you are, and
then I question that religion if it's authentic religion. Because authentic religion, it doesn't build walls. It brings people together. And there's so many people using religion today to justify hatred, hostility, rejection. This is not religion. It's political ideologies. It's philosophical ideologies that justify in their thinking separation and division. Authentic religion has as its ultimate goal the realization of one God, and that we can all find him in each other. I mean, that's the essence of Christianity. Jesus said, "I am present when you are gathered together in my name." Everything is about gathering. If you're interested in this, take the New Testament and just read it as not a religious document, but as just a piece of literature, and notice if vocabulary is an indication of mindset, notice the number of times that Jesus uses the word gather. "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, if only I could gather you," as a hen gathers her chicks, etc. And the ultimate statement, "He who does not gather with me scatters." So religion, in its best form, in its correct form, its authentic form, is never divisional. It's unitive. It brings people together. So when people say, in the name of this or in the name of that, I'm killing you, like that poor priest
I know.
in France.
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
85 years old. And of course, the two young men that did that were teenagers. But that's the great problem. There's such emptiness in life today for so many people, especially our young people, that they're easily seduced by violent ideologies, and they feel justified in
Do you
killing.
think that's a political problem in France?
It's a political problem. It's a religious problem. Particularly in France, it's very, very difficult.
They're very secular. They really push the secularism.
They have become very secularized, and of course the problem in Europe, and I've been back and forth there, and I studied in Europe, these great European countries in their colonialization policies in the 19th century, they went out to Africa, they went out to Indonesia, they went all over the world. And in many cases, God forgive me for saying this, but they took advantage of the people that were in these colonies. They stole their natural resources, etc. And then in some kind of a grand but dysfunctional gesture, they gave these people in these countries citizenship in the mother country, never thinking that in 100 years, these people would be standing on their front door with a French passport, a German passport, a Dutch, because the Dutch went into Indonesia, and demanding, citizenship and all of its privileges. And in France, and Lalonde is having a terrible struggle. Their structures, in terms of employment and everything, need to be seriously overhauled, because there are no jobs. And you have, especially in the northern part of Paris, in this area called Saint-Denis, there's a huge abbey, Benedictine abbey, there since the Middle Ages. And it was a neighborhood built for affluent families with 1 or 2 children, and the flats in the apartment complexes in Saint-Denis have 5, 6, 7 Algerian families with maybe 15 kids. And there's no jobs, there's no education, and these kids, because they have nothing, are easily seduced by ideologies that tell them that this will make you a martyr, this will make you... And we have done the same thing in the Christian faith. I'm not zeroing in on the Muslims and using them as the example. I mean, you can look back in Christian history, especially, why not, at the Crusades. And, it's sick religion, it's not authentic religion.
Right.
And it's justifying horrendous disregard of people in the name of God, which is clearly not authentic religion.
So these people are desperate to begin with.
They have nothing.
They have nothing already. They have no job.
Yeah.
So economics plays into it.
Absolutely.
And then the person who does have money, how responsible are they to their community? You brought up
yes,
community.
exactly, and I do believe that that's one of the things, that if God has blessed people with prosperity, then fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being prosperous, but the dynamic of the scriptures would say you have to take care of the poor. So some of your prosperity has got to be shared with people who are not as fortunate as you, and it's not just a question of giving a sandwich and a bed in a mission in a downtown city. It's changing the social structures in education, in politics, the bureaucracy of economy, law, getting in there and changing the structures that perpetuate the injustice. It's no good. I mean,
that scares people. That sounds more like socialism.
Well, it is socialism, but it's socialism of the best kind. There's nothing wrong with socialism as such.
Would you say that the Catholic Church is socialistic?
We have always favored building community, giving people a break, providing education, taking care of the poor, and everything. If that's socialism, it's also a gospel value.
You must be happy with the Pope.
I'm happy.
I mean, this guy seems. I mean, he is.
He's not.
He is some popular guy.
He's an extremely sensitive and deeply aware individual. And when some of the fundamentalist preachers, some of them even having radio programs have accused him of being a socialist or a communist. These are throwaway phrases with all kinds of images and agendas that don't apply to the guy. But they're so simplistic in their black and white way of doing life that everything has to be labeled, and then the label is supposed to be comprehensive. There are all kinds of subdivisions, nuances, categories within labels that a labeled word does not justify. And this Pope, I mean, we have to remember, he is himself the son of an immigrant Italian family who fled Italy and went to Buenos Aires. He was the provincial of the Jesuits for the 17 years that a military junta was in power in Argentina, where people just simply disappeared. And some of them have never been found. This guy has walked a tightrope all of his life, and he has a particular sensitivity. If you've been to Buenos Aires, or to where the Olympics are starting tonight, these favelas, a fancy word, they're slums of the worst kind where people spend their whole life inside of corrugated walls, and they paint them pretty colors because it looks nice for photography. But the reality is that what's going on inside of those painted corrugated walls is unbelievable injustice and the absolute deprivation of humanity. He's sensitive to that. He's not a socialist, if you want to use such a blanket word. He's concerned about people.
Yeah, he seems that.
And he's laid that trip very heavily on all of our consciences. And those of us who are comfortable, and I don't just mean financially, I mean those with good educations and positions of power and influence, we have to realize that where we are is not an honor, it's a call to service, so that the world is a better place because we've been here. I pray to God that when I'm on my deathbed and I look back what I have done with my life, I hope I have spent my life helping people.
Oh yeah, I think you do.
I would like to think that.
And do you ever have regrets about what being a priest?
No.
Have you never?
No. I mean,
How old were you?
I was when I started the journey, I was 13, but I didn't have any concept at 13.
But you came from a good Catholic family.
My mother and father were Irish immigrants. No, not in the least. In fact, my mother and my father always said to me, if this is not what you're supposed to do, get out before you get ordained.
Okay.
You know, and they were Irish immigrants. My father owned and operated an Irish pub in Philadelphia. I mean, I come from blue-collar, working-class people, and I'm proud of that. And they read life close to the wire, as all immigrants do, and they gave me personal freedoms, you know, that made me healthy. You know, they did not restrict me, but they didn't give me license either. I had to do things that they wanted me to do, and what they asked of me, I might have gritched about it at the time.
Yeah.
But now I'm deeply grateful that they gave me structures and frameworks. But they were not excessively pious. I mean, my father could put any sailor to shame.
Really?
Yes. And he was a pragmatic, concrete Irish immigrant guy. He came from County Donegal in Ireland, where they raise sheep and do hard labor. And my dad had a back as broad as a barn door. And the first job he had when he came to this country, he was a grave digger for a large cemetery run by the Catholic Church in Philadelphia. And that was before there was a backhoe.
Wow.
They dug the graves with a pick and shovel. And when my brother, who's several years older than I, did not live up to his expectations, the most stinging indictment that he could level against us was to say, what in the name of God have I done wrong that I've been cursed with 2 narrow-backed sons? So
I'm sure he was very proud
was my
of you,
country
though,
was
right?
my well, I would hope so.
Oh, sure.
But was my family over religious, super pious? We prayed the rosary. We went to mass every Sunday.
Right.
We had a nothing elaborate. We had a decent Catholic life.
Right.
And you know.
One day at 13,
well,
there was a light.
I was exposed, you know, to that kind of a religious upbringing. I was taught by nuns who were very dedicated women, and there were very good priests in the parish, and I wanted to be like them, and so the light began to shine.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you've told a story, but this is the last thing we'll talk about. You told a story last night about a priest, a young priest who was controlled by an overbearing, mean priest.
Yeah.
Can you tell us that story?
Well, I give retreats to priests, and this young priest was on one of these retreats, and he had been assigned to an older gentleman as what we call a parochial vicar, an assistant pastor, is what we used to call them in the old days. And, you know, the guy was just very oppressive to this young priest. And he was ordained maybe 6 months when I came upon him, and his spirit had already been defeated and demoralized. And in the conversation, he said he went into the bishop's office, and he didn't go in to trash this older priest and complain about him. He just simply went in to ask for a transfer. But, you know, I'll never forget that, because he began to cry in the bishop's office, because I think he was so wounded. You know, his idealism had been defeated, and he was only 6 months into this vocation. And he said, I was mortified. I'm 26 years of age, and I'm sitting in the boss's office, and I'm crying like a kid. And I couldn't stop, he said. And I put my head in my hands on my side of the bishop's desk, and I just cried and cried. And I asked him, I said, you know, did the bishop say anything? What did the bishop say? And, you know, it moved me deeply. He said the bishop didn't say anything, but when I looked up, he was crying with me.
Gosh, that's a good priest. That's right. Is that the
I mean, of course,
ideal?
If we cannot, you know, cry with people, suffer with people, our lives as priests, we're not just performing functions. You know, we're involved. I mean, and it's true. We're with them in the beginning of life when we baptize them. We're with them in their educational process. We're with them when we prepare them for marriage or some significant job. We educate them. We're with them when the struggles and the problems come, and we bury them. I mean, our lives are enmeshed with people, and a good priest, you know, connects with that. It's not about me, it's about what I can do for you.
Exactly. Well, Father, I knew this was going to be awesome. I knew it, and thank you so much.
The pleasure's mine. Now, where am I here?
You're right here at the church. Just walk to the corner and cross the street.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good trip and have fun down in the Virgin Islands.
Thank you, I will.
All right.